Welcome to the CatholicPsych Show. As the world holds its breath before the big debate on Thursday, it's kind of a slow news day. But we will be talking about Julian Assange and public trust in the government. A lot of little stories today. Dopamine detoxes, Taylor Swift and her what's the word? Her, not an admonition, but her exhortation to F the patriarchy, death doulas, gun violence, and of course, we love AI, robotics, tech, and then maybe lastly we'll get to space. I don't know how much of this we're going to get to. We may get to all of it. We may get to none of it. But I'm here today with Sam Todzia, member of our CP Map program and student. Great to have you on. How you doing, Sam?
I'm good, Dr. Bryan. Thank you. It's fun to be here.
Yes, first time you're replacing Dr. Greg. He's scuba diving today.
That's good. Good for him. It's a nice hot day out for that. So.
Yep. Hopefully he'll bring back some pictures and images. Wednesday hump day. How's your week going? How do you feel about this week?
Week is good. It's a week off from the schoolwork here at CP Map. So it's actually kind of nice. Hoping to knock a bunch of projects out and focus on some other things, because a lot of the time I have in the background of everything I'm doing this, need to focus on what I'm learning here at CP Map. So it's kind of a nice week.
That and balancing many children.
Yeah. Yes.
I told you need to get a sheepdog before this. You got to corral all your kids, huh?
Well, I have an 11-year-old daughter who's probably the closest thing to a sheepdog because she's so helpful with the other kids. So yeah, it's such a gift to have one who's responsible and who's really good with the younger kids. So
yes, that's helpful. So we have next week. I may be gone next week. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'll go scuba diving next week. We'll see. I'll be away, but it's the 4th of July week, and so it's kind of like feeling like people are leading up to vacation in general. It's the lull, especially with the heat. Nobody wants to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do anything.
I love July 4th. I think it's gonna be great. Yeah. Hopefully it won't be oppressive heat.
Hopefully not. All right, let's jump in here. So. We wanted to tie these two stories together. We have this idea of public trust. Polls came out regarding public trust in the government and Julian Assange. We were talking about whether or not we have much to say about Julian Assange. Probably not that much. For people who don't know who he is, this is the story that came in through most of my feeds today. It's like that's how slow the news is. It's like everyone was talking about the fact that not much has happened besides his plea. So WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange pleaded guilty yesterday to conspiring to obtain and disclose U.S. national defense information. So this is the guy that's one of the main figures in the WikiLeaks, quote, scandal. He's the whistleblower. Mm-hmm. Assange's plea deal includes a 62-month sentence, crediting the 5 years he already served at a London prison. So it means he doesn't serve jail time, allowing him to avoid U.S.
guilty plea to go for, right? Yeah, as soon as you say you're guilty, you get to go home. That sounds like a pretty good deal.
I can imagine some stubborn people, based on principle, would not want the label of convicted felon. He's 52 years old, expected to return to his home country of Australia. This charges stem from hundreds of thousands of classified U.S. military documents released by WikiLeaks in 2010 and the U.S. wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. So in my adult life, that's really when, maybe I was just too young before that time period, but that was the first time that I started to hear about public erosion of trust in the federal government around the Iraq war. Around idea like Bush and weapons of mass destruction. And was that a war that was based on just oil and money? And we were like trying to justify it based on 9/11. And Assange was a whistleblower in the idea of public trust. You have any thoughts on Assange? Or, we'll get into public trust in a second, but what are your thoughts? Like, should he have blown the whistle? Should he go to prison for blowing the whistle?
Honestly, I wouldn't have enough information, enough knowledge about that to have a really informed opinion. But at the same time, sort of outside of this particular instance, I like the idea of accountability. So again, not necessarily specific to Julian Assange, but in general, I think it speaks to what you said we're going to talk about here, kind of leading into just public trust in general of the government. When we find out that there are things being withheld from us that would maybe change our opinions, I don't know, is Is there such a thing as knowing too much when it comes to being able to trust?
I think,
You tell me, Doc.
I think so. I mean, like, do I want like my children knowing about the bills that I have to pay? No. But I'd like to think I'm a trustworthy parent, right? This would probably be a nice dovetail into the Taylor Swift conversation about F the patriarchy. It's like, is hierarchy bad? Like, it can be if there's abuse of power. Can we ever trust human beings to not abuse power? Probably not. But like with the, they talk about like Christianity, like the model for Christianity being the benevolent monarchy, like the monarchy with the benevolent king. Like if your king is Jesus,
right?
Like you can trust hierarchy there, right? So if you have parents that you can trust with the power that they have over you, or leadership, it's the same thing across different contexts. Then I would want to trust the government to withhold information from me if it's in my best interest.
Yeah, that's fair. I suppose that's fair.
But I don't know that we could ever trust the government. I mean, people would say we have original sin. People would say the government is corrupt. Yeah. People definitely don't trust the government now.
Yeah, I have an initial response to, go ahead and trust the government. That's like, it's cautious. That's the way that I hear that is more cautious. And I also sometimes wonder too, if that isn't the best comparison of, it's a good analogy of parenting, right? Because
parents are the government.
Times, there's going to definitely be times as a parent where, my wife and I, we constantly sort of say things, purposely leaving the kids out of it,
Sure.
And so it's, there's definitely something there that I think is healthy for them. But is the government really like a parent? That's where I start to worry a little bit. And we have a representative government too. So it's supposed to be the people, right? Yeah. So I don't know if a monarchy is a little different setup.
Well, let me ask you this. Before we get to whether or not it's a fair comparison, which I think you make a really good point, I want to ask you this. Are there times where you tell your kids to take out the garbage just because you're lazy? Right? Like, do you abuse your power, your parental power and influence because of your original sins?
Oh, goodness. Well, I spent the first hour today taking out the garbage and going to the dump. So they were sleeping while I did that. So they can trust that it got done. They wake up and it's done.
You have the power. There's got to be moments like where there's temptations to abuse the power for your own ends to make your life more. I mean, unless you're living completely as self-gift, shedding blood, to the point of shedding blood to live a life of holiness. There's probably times when, you send your kids to bed before they should go.
I'll tell you that blessing of my daughter, who's so good with the other kids, is that she's the one we'll turn to, and it's kind of like, hey, I know you were in the middle of something, but I need you over here, and so we do take that, we do, I don't hate to say take advantage of it, but we're building on that gift that she has. And sometimes she's like, oh, I always have to do this, So there is something to be said there.
Yeah, the accountability piece is important. We need those checks and balances. Now, in terms of whether it's a fair comparison, you're right, it's very different in some ways. I think it's fair in this sense though, that we in our program we talk about the concept of projection, right? And this unconscious process by which certain contexts are different in content. It's obviously like being in a family is not the same as the federal government. Like common sense tells us that. However, like there's an emotional feeling and association around being in a position within a hierarchy, which makes it feel like the same thing. Right. So we talk about this, like even in our clinical work, where if someone comes to us for help, like I'm not my client's parents, but to them at times unconsciously, they project issues with their parents onto me. We are different. I'm not their parents.
Right.
But still, but still like unconsciously there's this like I said, projection, like a projector, like you unconsciously assume it's the same thing because it feels the same even though it's different. So so my point though is like I think oftentimes people project their family issues onto things like government and society. And that determines their political position at times.
Yeah, a lot of times. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that there's something to be said for that.
Like if you've been, now this is going to be a large sweeping statement, but if you've if you've been betrayed in your family system, if you had parents that were always taking advantage of you, never took the trash out, and always made you take the trash out, or far worse, right? Abuse, like serious situations, things that weren't well, like you're not going to trust people in a position of authority.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's
absolutely.
going to,
so and you're going to meet people you're going to have people in your life who are in positions of authority over you, or people who have a personality that's authoritative. And so how you respond to those relationships is, it all plays through, right? The relational template.
Yeah. I think about people who have to own their own business because they can't work for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have
Are you
a
saying
long.
that because I'm in front of you, and that's how is that why you're saying that?
No, not at all. No, but that's not true of every business owner. But a lot of times, I know people that are like, I can't work for someone.
Yeah.
Like if you can't work for someone, you should probably take a closer look.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. That's something I've been working through with my supervisor. Actually, is because even giving over to the process of CP MAP, I find that I have particular, I'll pick up on something, and it'll hit me a little different than probably somebody else. And it comes back to, remember, I take a risk in signing up for this program and investing all this time into it. And I'm one of those guys now who's had a taste of working for himself. And so with this idea of going back and working for someone, there's a hesitancy there. And I can feel that coming through in what I'm learning here and looking forward to doing this work.
I love that. That's really honest. Yeah, because you lose control and you lose freedom.
Yeah. Yep.
I also think you have to be able to follow in order to become a good leader. You have to learn how to follow. Because, if you're asking people to do things for you, you have to like think about what it's like to be asked. If you're giving direction and you're in a position of leadership and you're leading people, like, just something as simple as like, do this. And it may not make sense to you, but it makes sense to me from my position, from my viewpoint. Like you have to remember that if you're not in that viewpoint and someone's telling you to do something and it doesn't make sense, then questions of trust and frustration might surface, right? Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about what this study said. So about public trust in the government as it's waned from 1958 to now. So Lyndon B. Johnson, trust in the government during Lyndon B. Johnson's time. For the study asks, do you trust the government to do what is right just about always or most of the time? It was at 65% of people trusted the government to do what is right most of the time.
That's hard. That's hard to imagine right now that could ever have been the case, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And the interesting thing about this article is they're highlighting how trust has gone up. But listen to the numbers in which trust has gone up. So public trust in the federal government, which has been low for decades, has increased modestly since 2023. So over last year, it's gotten better. What numbers would you think it's gone from? As of April 2024, 22% of Americans say they trust the government in Washington to do what is right just about always.
Yeah, that sounds 2%. About right.
2% of the time.
2%.
Just about, no, so 22% say they trust the government to do what is right. But 2% of them is just about always, but most of the time is 21%.
Yeah.
Last year, 16% said they trusted the government just about always or most of the time, which was among the lowest measures in nearly 7 decades of polling.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That is crazy. But honestly, it's not all that surprising either. Thinking about the way things have gone for the last really 3-4 years. It's been, it hasn't felt stable, and when somebody's life doesn't feel stable, they look for somebody to, to point their finger at, so.
When Trump first ran for office, I think people forget the cultural climate. I remember very specifically that one of the reasons he gained popularity so quickly was that, I think part of the platform, if I remember correctly, was like, I'm not one of those bureaucrats in Washington. We had the government shutdown before that.
Mm-hmm.
And he came in and he's like, I'm not like one of them. Like this, that was his political angle. He was riding the lack of trust coming in. Now he's now a politician, and whether or not you trust Trump is a different question. But that was what his part of his platform was. Yeah. And then when we look at, so conservatives tend to trust the government less than than liberals at this point.
Right.
This study says. And then when you break it down by race demographics, it's very interesting. So Asians and Hispanics trust the government about 23%. Blacks, 21% of them. Whites, 13%. So whites trust the current administration far less than Asians, Hispanics, and blacks. Now, you're a political analyst by trade.
Of course. Yeah, this is what I do. Yeah. Bring it on.
What do you have any gut reaction to that? Like, why do you think whites trust the government far less?
I don't know. I can't make sense of it with an initial thought about why that would be.
No, I mean, I think there is among liberals, there is at least a, whether or not it's true, it's a different question, but at least there's a rhetoric around equality and diversity, right? And a lot of people don't really delve into politics, but they have kind of surfacey, like, armchair opinions about what's happening politically. And if the rhetoric is that we're balancing out the inequality, then I can see why minority groups would have more trust than white groups who might feel more marginalized. That's my guess. Please send a letter, type in the comments, send mailbag questions, increase our reach. But I mean, like, without being very well informed, that's like my gut guess of why there's that discrepancy, but I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, if you're going to be, if we're going to see a increase in minority trust, then if that's what's in the headlines, if that's what people are talking about and the government is talking about, then I suppose then you can feel like you're part of that, and they've got your best interest in mind. So I suppose it makes sense. Does that mean if that wasn't a topic being discussed or being addressed directly, would those minorities also then be at a similar level to that lower white 16% trust level? I don't know.
It's a great question.
Or would it actually even be affected in another way? Like maybe that percentage from that white percentage maybe is even lower because they feel like that no one's looking out for them. I don't know.
Yeah.
The whole conversation makes me uncomfortable because I wish we would just get past it and look for what's best for Americans.
I know. I mean, you want to like, there's that coach for the Boston Celtics who was asked about being the historic first black coach, and his response was, or him and Jason Kidd. So Joe Mazzulla is the boss. We talked about this in a previous episode, but Joe Mazzulla was there was the first NBA Finals where there were two black coaches. Joe Mazzulla was the Boston Celtics coach, and Jason Kidd was the Dallas Mavericks coach. And they asked him what it's like at this historic moment of having two black coaches, and he said, "I wonder how many of them were Christians." So he's like a super Catholic guy, Joe Mazzulla, and he's like, well, "You're asking me about race, but actually the most important thing is a question of faith." And from our perspective, like, I wish issues of race were behind us too. Yeah. I wish there wasn't systemic inequality, oppression, racism, and we could really get to the point where we're all like concerned about salvation more than anything else.
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah, get our heads on straight here.
Yeah. Okay. So we got some comments here before we switch topics. So nice. I don't know how the topics we're going to flow today, but Taylor Swift. It's going to be a nice dovetail into this Taylor Swift topic. So Mike asked, "What is the CP map?" So that's actually a good question before we get into the government. Going back to talking about how you're a member of the CP map. So this is obviously a tremendous topic. So anybody that's interested in what that acronym means can go to CatholicPsych.com. It's the Catholic Psych model of applied personalism, in which we train people in our model of mentorship and accompaniment, which integrates spirituality and psychology through one-on-one daily accompaniment. It's our model. It's a big deal. So we help people who are struggling with psycho-spiritual issues, and then we also train people on how to help people. And so Sam is part of that program and being trained for how to help people. So that's a quick version. Learn more at CatholicPsych.com. Great question, Mike. Okay, now let's move to some of the government questions on this topic. So Catherine asks, "I struggle with the analogy talking about family and government, right? Unlike parents, the government is elected to represent adult voters." Yes, I don't know if my children would elect me to be their parents. Some days, when we go get ice cream, they might elect me.
Yeah, right.
When I tell them to go to bed, they may not. That's probably why they shouldn't be in control, right? Because they can't tell the difference. They can't discern what is properly best for them. We are all adults in this scenario, not dependent children. Yeah, it's true. What do you think about that comment?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is real spiritual growth is trusting our Father, our Heavenly Father. And so all of us, in a way, I think it's really healthy, really, for all of us to, in some ways, consider ourselves dependent children. The more we realize our dependence on God, the kind of the deeper we go in our faith. Does that apply to this conversation with the government? Not really. Again, it's like Catherine is saying here. She struggles with the analogy because it doesn't apply as much. But that was what first popped into my head is that I'm growing by embracing my childhood. As far as the divine sonship.
Yes, no, that's a great point. Learning how to become a child again is the paradox of learning how to become a child again helps you in the spiritual life, or is necessary for spiritual growth. The thing that comes to my mind too, though, here a little bit, and we keep sidestepping to different analogies, but when we're talking about hierarchy, is like religious obedience. So I'm certainly not advocating for blind obedience in a context where someone does not have your best interest in mind or is abusive or something like that. But in the spiritual life, and I'm sure there may be some religious out there or priests out there that can correct me. Dr. Greg can speak more to this as he was a religious, but the idea is that the person that is your superior is standing in for God. So your spiritual growth is dependent upon your obedience. So not that everything they say is right or true or good, right? But when you are obedient to them, that provides opportunity for spiritual growth, because it's as if you're saying yes to God. Because in your life, I'm not sure, I don't know much about your life, but I know for my life, there are moments of deep tragedy that make no sense. That make absolutely no sense. And there are these moments where we're called to trust God where it makes no sense. And in some ways, having obedience, learning obedience helps prepare you for those moments where you have to trust in God when it doesn't make any sense. So, you might say in religious life, I want to be part of this apostolate. And your superior says, no, doesn't matter what you want. I want you over here. And you have to kind of like suck it up and be obedient to where you have to go for that apostolate. And you may say, like, I'm terrible at typing. Why would I go over here? I want to do ministry with teens or something like that. I'm just making stuff up. But the obedience actually helps you grow spiritually. And then that decision is blessed, and your spiritual growth comes out of learning, like doing administrative work and typing or something like that.
Right.
So I think, when we're talking about the actual content of life, that's one thing. But there's also a spiritual layer to these things where, like, it's also about our relationship with God at the same time. I think that was your point. It's like, you may have, like, so you're in CP Map and you're bringing up your stuff and learning how to be obedient to a supervisor or whatever, and you own your own business, and that's different. But even if your supervisor, like, you can't see what your supervisor is doing, you don't trust them, still, it's actually about you becoming a child in relation to God the Father on a spiritual level.
Yep. No, that's fair. Yeah. And that's where I'm at, right? That's where I'm being challenged. And it's good. And at the same time, it's frustrating because it wouldn't be growth if it wasn't, right? If you weren't in that discomfort and trying to push forward. So, but it's all tied together. Again, how do we bring this back to trust in the government? I think it's a little bit removed, but okay.
Well, I think it's trust in hierarchical systems. I guess Little Flowers of Jesus 95 says, I guess something that really matters is what they mean by trust. Fair point. Trust for the government to fix all problems. Yeah, no, that would be ridiculous, right? We don't live in a utopian world where you have blind trust in the government to address everything going on. I mean, we don't even trust like the Catholic faith to resolve my sewage problem. We don't trust any institution with complete trust for everything, but trust in the government as in functioning as it should. That's a good point. I like that. All right, so let's dovetail that into Taylor Swift. You might ask, is that a stretch, Dr. Bryan?
Seamless transition.
Seamless. So social media. Okay, I'm going to read this article. Social media isn't happy with Taylor Swift after some old lyrics went viral. Swift is all over social media after Travis Kelce appeared at a show in London with her on Sunday. So that's actually not the story. It set the crowd on fire that Travis Kelce showed up. He's a football player. Their relationship is widely publicized. But that's not the only reason she's trending all over social media. Here's the real point. A video from earlier June show in Liverpool had surfaced on X, and people aren't happy. She sang the lyrics, quote, F the patriarchy. These lyrics from her mega hit song All Too Well were released in 2024, or 21 rather. So she's getting the entire crowd to say F the patriarchy together. And it was a mixed crowd. Not everyone said that. Not everyone, not only people who espouse this kind of ideology are fans of Taylor Swift, but she has a lot of influence.
Yeah.
What's your first reaction to I think it was like 60,000 people being led by Taylor Swift saying F the patriarchy? What's your visceral gut reaction?
A little bit of a couple different things, really. I almost feel a little bad for her because she has this responsibility that she has to bear. She's become this icon that so many people look up to. And I imagine that that's difficult. And in a way it should be, she should be careful because of that influence that she carries. And so for her to say something like this, my initial thought is, how many, even just, I don't know, again, maybe I'm too sensitive. My parents would get mad at me if I swore growing up, so to me, I'm like, just, I'm sure there's little girls in the crowd, probably even little girls with their parents. And to have that, I would just find myself
literally don't trust the person that brought you to my concert.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. That's deeper irony there, right? Little girl turns to her dad. Yeah. I think I would be really disappointed, and I would just think of the influence and sort of the almost like a magical presence of being at that show and looking up to this very successful, and in so many ways she's sweet, and then to hear that would really change the tone and the way that I would see her, and just in general, that this headline surprised me. I'm not all caught up on things Taylor Swift, but
I want to read some of these tweets. These tweets I think are kind of funny, but as you're talking, I'm thinking about it's a great perspective of the magic that is possible when a child or a teen looks up to someone as a role model, and you think about the power and influence they might have. It's a larger topic that around whether or not celebrities and athletes should use their platforms, and how should they use their platforms to influence culture? Is it fair for them to do so? And on the one hand, I think, they certainly have the right, and I could understand why they would want to. On the other hand, they often don't know what they're talking about at all, and to have such a sway over so many followers that are also uninformed, typically youth and young adults, like that, I think is dangerous. It comes to my mind. Growing up, I was a huge MJ fan, Michael Jordan fan.
Oh yeah.
And he famously was he stayed out of politics. And that is not true of athletes today. That's not true of NBA stars today. They push back against, I forget, there was some quote that said shut up and dribble. And so they push back against the shut up and dribble movement. Yeah. Yep. But Michael Jordan famously said, he was asked why he doesn't get more involved politically, and he said, "Republicans buy Nikes too."
Right. It's just a smart decision, smart business decision, really, right?
Yes. I mean, you can look at the moral implications of that. Are you pursuing money and not, standing up for what you believe? But I mean, there is a freedom in being able to have everyone root for Michael Jordan, to not have him be so divisive. Because
why do we turn to something like the NBA, right? We want to be entertained. We want to enter into the skills that they've developed and to be in awe. And you don't want to have that brought down by some remark that really just hits you wrong.
He stayed out of it. I mean, music's a little bit different. I mean, going all the way back to 1960s protest songs, you're literally using your lyrics to influence culture. So that I kind of get, but Let me read some of these tweets, which I think are very funny. Taylor Swift's career would not be possible without all the men who build those giant sets, drive them in semi trucks cross country for her tours, light and sound engineers, etc. The world makes her success possible. The world that makes her success possible is invented, built, and maintained by men. Oof. I mean, there's so many, like, it's a funny tweet, so many problems with it. It's like, well, men are strong. But then the final line, invented, built, and maintained by men. I mean, look, I mean, because of the historical power of men, like, yeah, they've been in leadership positions and been in the workforce. So yes. Next comment. Taylor Swift got her audience of, it wasn't 60,000 fans, it was 88,000 fans. I was incorrect. Taylor Swift got her audience of 88,000 fans to scream F the patriarchy at her concert yesterday. Lady, you a billionaire. Get your head checked. I mean, that is part of the irony. Like, how much of a patriarchy is there if you are a female billionaire?
Right.
You know,
how much is this? How much is the patriarchy keeping you down in that circumstance? And it's hard too, because you don't want to, I don't know, that also sounds a little degrading to her, and I wouldn't want that to be the case either. But there is like a gratitude missing, you know, or something. I don't know. There's just a general, sense of feeling blessed when someone can make a declaration like that. I mean, unless something happened to her in a way that she feels justifies that. But yeah, you know, you step back, and this is why we say count our blessings, right? Count your blessings. We do, you know, what are you grateful for at the end of the day with our kids? What happened today? What can you be, you know, where can you find gratitude in your day? And, you know, I wonder if some of these people who espouse something like F the patriarchy, if they could really benefit from just a little bit of time reflection every day. And you don't, you know, you said you have you were joking, you said you had a issue with your septic or something like that, right? The sewage issue. Like, people take care of that stuff, and, you know, you contribute to it by being a responsible citizen, paying your taxes or whatever. But how blessed are we? You know, simple things that we don't even think about.
My concern with this kind of ideology or position is, I mean, certainly historically, more men have been in positions of leadership. Okay, that's obvious. We have been historically patriarchal in that sense as a culture and as a society. And the critique is that men have abused that power, which is very fair critique.
Oh yeah.
Men have abused that power. The reaction to it is always confusing for me, though. It's oftentimes no to patriarchy, yes to matriarchy. As if, you know, I'm thinking about this new Star Wars show that came out, and I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole with that, but like, yes, there are individuals who have been corrupt and abused their power. There are men, right? So to say, tear down patriarchy because of bad men and replace it with matriarchy as if there are no bad women. Like there are bad individuals.
Yeah, right.
On either side, you know, I think about like bullies. Like when you're growing up and there are boy bullies and there are girl bullies. Which are worse? Like if you're bullied by a boy, you'll get beat up. If you're bullied by a girl, you're going to have to move. Like a girl group, you know, it's like those villains that are like, I'm not just going to kill you. I'm going to kill your third cousin. You know, like women can be absolutely ruthless because of their feminine gifts of relationality and control. And like their capacity, women have so much power relationally. So it's not as if like matriarchy is like the answer. I think like virtue is the answer.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. This is why holiness is so important, right? This is why we need a healthy sense of the power that we hold, you know, and it has to be utilized in an appropriate way. You know, there are times where, like as a father, right, where there are times where you have to be that authority, right? Yes. But you don't want your kids to only see you as that authority. No. You know, you want to also have that that tenderness with them, and that they know that they can come to you in their moment of need. And if you see it just as this fear, I mean, that's an unhealthy, it's unhealthy. So again, virtue, and the pursuit of holiness. This is it. This is a
Yeah.
solution. But then how do people like go back to trust in government, right? Who gets involved in government other than someone who probably struggles with narcissism and thinks that they can fix everything?
People antisocial that break rules in order
Right.
rules don't apply to them. No, but you made such a good point too about trust and tenderness from a parental position. You know, we talk about how when you're parenting, empathy is so important before you give like the direction or the education.
Mhm.
So the
Mhm.
child knows that like I'm not abusing my power. So it's, you know, you don't want to go back to the trash example. I don't want to take out the trash. You tell your kid to take out the trash. I don't want to take it out. So if you're just like, take out the trash because I said so, that's one problem.
Yeah.
Another problem is, okay, you don't have to take it out. That's permissive parenting. That's a cultural norm today,
Right.
right? The little
Right.
emperors that we're creating. But the danger on the because I said so approach is the child is left to wonder what I brought up to you before. Like maybe that lazy son of a gun doesn't want to take it out himself.
Mhm.
But if
Mhm.
you enter into their space in the way you're talking about, which is, you know, I know you've had a hard day. I know you just got home from school. I know you want to play outside and you don't feel like taking it out right now, or you want to relax. I know it's tough and it's the last thing you want to do. Empathy. Now the child
Mhm.
knows I see you.
Mhm.
Then you give a little education and it's like, well, you know, but I want to teach you responsibility. I want to help you earn allowance, see that you're part of a community in this family. So take it out. Right. There's the directive comes at the end.
Right.
You know,
Right.
without that first part, if it's just because I said so, then you're
Yeah.
left to wonder like about the abuse of power
Right.
by the parent.
Right.
Are they
It's so
serving me with
tempting too.
power?
It's so tempting to just be like, you know, this is my role, you know, this is your role. So, you know, take out the proverbial garbage here or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
There's that temptation of, I don't have to explain myself to you. But that's where I think the trust comes in. That's
Yeah.
where it breaks down.
It's like Christ washing the feet. I mean, he had more power than any of us. And he's like, here's the model with your
Right.
leadership, with your power, with your authority, serve others. The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. Right.
Right.
That's the model for us. All right. We have
Yeah.
some,
And the whole gospel really is the explanation of why, right? The whole life of Jesus is constant teaching as
yeah.
to why, you know, not just follow these commandments, but here's why, here's how you'll flourish, here's how you're going to grow. Um, and it's ultimately for our good. That's what we learn through the whole gospel. It's the good news. So the
Yeah.
explanation is key.
And you think like about how the United States, um, I mean, it's built in a Judeo-Christian culture, you know. I mean, some of our early founding fathers were deists, so they
Mhm.
weren't Christians in like they weren't Catholics. Let's put it that way. They weren't Catholics, but I think people would agree that like even if you're not a Christian or a Catholic, these values that are very Christian that we're describing right now, that those are the exact kind of values that you would want your government officials to live
Right.
by.
Right.
Serve me with your power. So even
Yeah.
if you're not Christian, you got to at least like tip your cap to us on this point, right?
or maybe to Christ, right? Maybe
Yes.
we get directed appropriately there. But yeah, I mean,
Yes.
you know, my brother and I, we work together with a couple of little businesses, and we always say that the person you're looking for, even if you're non-religious, the person you really are looking for to have work for you is someone who is Christian. They're gonna, you know, if they actually hold themselves accountable to what they profess to believe,
Mm,
that's who you want working for you. And
yeah.
yeah, that's why again, maybe we go back to public trust in government is because even if somebody in government professes Christianity and to the best of their ability practices it, there is something there that's like, I don't know, the person who has the humility of saying, I can't fix everything. I'm just gonna grow in virtue and do my part.
Right.
They rarely get into government. You know, they rarely end up finding themselves seeking that position of hierarchy. Um,
Yes. You know, this is totally off topic, but I think the church is going to really grow as it moves forward and develops, as it incorporates more of like Eastern culture and philosophy. I mean, certainly not anything that would contradict historical Catholic teaching by the magisterium or
mhm.
tradition or anything. But you know, I think of Lao Tzu. You know who Lao Tzu is? He's one of the great
I've
Chinese
seen the
philosophers.
Yeah, I
I
think
think
I've
he's,
seen
I
little
think
quotes by him.
I think he's Chinese, but he talks about. I mean, he's the founder of Taoism and talks about the way. But one of his maxims is in knowing your limits, you are limitless.
Mm,
So it's like, if you know that you can't lift this huge boulder, if you're honest with yourself, you're going to ask for help. And now the boulder gets moved, so knowing your limitations and being honest with that. I mean, this is far afield, but I just came to my mind because I love that Lao Tzu philosophy. I think we should baptize all that.
That makes sense.
We'll get Dr. Greg on that.
Yeah, good.
Let's go to the chat here. Audrey says it's a nuanced question. But isn't it the patriarch that's partly responsible for her Taylor Swift success? Mm-hmm. In some sense, this is the context. I mean, like a patriarchal society, if we live in one. Matt Walsh says we don't live in one. The fact that she's a billionaire suggests that we are not in a patriarchy. I'm not sure that's true. I mean, men still hold more leadership positions than women. But is it responsible for her success? Yeah. I mean, like the structure that's set up has allowed her to be successful. I think that's a good point.
Yeah, or at least she, as Audrey wrote here, partly responsible. That's very fair. Absolutely.
Partly.
At the very least, partly responsible.
Great point. Original sin comes from both genders. That's from Catherine. Yep. Little Flowers says, "Amen. Women evil characters in stories are way scarier than men." I'm glad. Yes. Yes. I'm glad that was balanced because it may not have sounded great coming from me earlier. I assume Little Flower of Jesus 95 is a woman. Maybe it's Saint Therese texting from heaven. Example: Lady Macbeth, White Witch, and Maleficent. Yes, those are all terrifying, scary characters. A lot of the female, like in the Disney princess stories, there's a lot of female villains.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Whether it's Cruella de Vil or whomever.
They're always bossing around guys.
Yeah. Yeah, but usually the bossing around guys, but they're like bad mothers to the daughters, who are the princesses.
Yeah, that's right.
Instagram question, just joined. This may be off topic, but does this obedience apply to lay people working for the church? No, it does not. We're talking about something totally different when we're talking about someone who takes vows of obedience in the religious context or as a priest. When it comes to obedience, for lay people working for the church, I mean, or any lay person in any capacity. Now we're talking about individual questions and case specific examples where someone would have to discern whether or not obedience is moral, holy, good for them. It's a different question.
Probably good to get spiritual advice. Maybe a spiritual advisor there too.
Definitely.
Very, very good resource for a lay person is to have somebody they're connected to that's a spiritual advisor.
Yeah, and probably not the person. Don't have the spiritual advisor be the person that you're working for within the church. Find a different spiritual.
Probably a really good thing to consider.
Yes. Okay. So I want to swap here a little bit. I want to talk about death doulas.
Uplifting topic.
Death doulas. I mean, maybe it is. So, okay. So there's this new growing field called a death doula. It's someone who guides the dying and their loved ones through grief, from the logistics of closing a social media account to the experience of holding their hand as they pass. So people are being hired to accompany others as they're dying. This is a growing field. There's a lot here. So this article talks about what a good death is. So medical literature shows that people generally prefer simplicity. They want to die at home with loved ones near and have relief from physical pain and emotional distress. They want to know what to expect and how to make their own decisions. Things people value in death are the same things they value in life: community, open conversation, purposefulness. But only 14% of people who need palliative care, that's dying care for the dying, which involves not just specialized medical care, but spiritual, social, and emotional nurturing, receive it. Only 14% of people receive that as they're dying. Wow. Yeah, so there's a lot here. Any first reactions to the death doula and dying and having a good death?
I mean, yeah, in so many ways, it's the culmination, right? I mean, it's and there's probably so much fear, I think, would be a main common experience. But my first thought here is, if this is a popular thing that's growing, my first thought is that's kind of a.
Oop. You there? I think I might have lost you. I'm not sure if the feed lost you or the feed lost me. Hopefully you'll come back if I'm still live. If I'm still alive, I'll keep talking. Yeah, my thoughts on the movement are yeah, I think we lost Sam, so I'll keep talking. I think it's sad that we're at the point that we need to hire people to accompany us. Okay, yeah, Mike says I'm still alive. We lost Sam. Hopefully Sam will come back in a second. And I'm not monologuing for the next 13 minutes. Nobody wants to listen to me for that long. Let's see, Sam, where are you? Go try and get him back in here. Yeah, I think we're in a sad place if we're hiring people to help us pass away. You know, traditionally, family life and a sound spiritual life was really supportive around that very difficult, painful time. And I've always said, in life, we want to find an example of someone to guide us, especially in death. I'm blessed to have, my parents still alive. But I'm certainly looking to them to learn how to die well. I want to be a model to my children in terms of how to die well. And what does that look like from a spiritual perspective? It probably means accepting suffering, not losing hope, pushing back against the temptation to despair, growing in my spiritual life. That's essentially what a good death should be. Let's see. I think Sam might be coming back here. We'll try him again. Yeah, you might be having some internet issues. It happens, folks. It's a live show. Yeah, so I think as people are further and further moving away from devout spiritual lives, and the question of death is becoming more prominent as you grow older, you start to scramble and try to figure out, what does it mean to die? What does it mean to die well? So now we have this new people teaching you how to die well. And by the way, they don't have that much experience. I mean, they have a certain degree of experience, perhaps by accompanying people, but death is a lonely experience. When we talk about death anxiety, death is the worst thing that there is. There's nothing worse than death, because death represents the ultimate separation from others. Sam keeps coming in and out. I keep trying to bring him in, but I don't think he's able to stick. Sam, you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can't see you, but that's a good start.
Yeah, we'll take that, right? Let's see if I can figure it out here.
I'll keep talking while you're figuring out. So death anxiety. So what is death anxiety? So anxiety did not exist before the fall, right? Death anxiety. Oh, there you are. So death came into the world as a result of sin, because we became separated from God. That space in between our disconnection with God created anxiety. So anxiety is really about relational disconnection from other people. And death represents the ultimate separation. You can't go with me. I think of Sam and Frodo from Lord of the Rings. Like, you can't go with me when I die. Don't go where I can't go, Mr. Frodo. Right? Like that is like the darkest thing. And so it's terrifying that we actually have to do it alone. It's a very lonely experience. The good news, and this is the gospel, the good news. Pope Benedict talks about, I think it's an introduction to Christianity, how like death is a revolving door for Jesus. Like he's not scared of it. Like he went down into he descended to hell. The third day he rose from the dead. He went to the Sheol and brought the souls up, and so he rose from the dead. So it's not a big deal. So he actually holds our hands through the doors of death. This is the great consolation of the Christian message, that we actually don't need to be scared of death. We're literally dying while he's with us through that entire experience. It's not as if like we die and then hopefully he's there on the other side. Like we're accompanied through death in our spiritual lives. But if you don't have faith, it's terrifying because we have to do it completely on our own. Sorry, we lost you. You were saying some things before. Did you want to pick up where you left off?
Sure. I was enjoying that though. Yeah, I was just thinking that the the fact that there are these death doulas, that this could become a growing trend, is really kind of sad, because the way that I would think
Yeah.
of it is you have that built in as family, would be the hope, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so what would be the need for a death doula? And the whole idea of it being like I
Yeah.
don't know, like a business or something, just seems um, like it depersonalizes it in some way. But at the same
Yeah.
time, I'm sure that you could find someone who would really care for you. If you're a death doula, you should probably get in touch with CatholicPsych and get a mentor, because I bet it's a really challenging thing to just be around dying people all the time. And maybe for somebody that's their gift, but it also seems like it kind of takes the place of the priest.
That's a
The
good point.
priest plays an active role in being with people and ushering them toward a good death, or at least it
Yeah.
should.
Yeah.
And St. Joseph comes to mind too.
Patron of a happy death. Yeah, I
Yeah,
pray to him for that every day.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Father Benedict Rochelle used to tell a story about an Italian CFR that he knew that used to say every day he saw, when he said goodbye to people, he'd say, "Pray for my happy death," like in every conversation. And then when he was on his deathbed, he was like silent. He was silent for hours. And he was just laying in his bed, and all the friars were around praying for him because he was like dying and suffering. And then all of a sudden he shoots up and sits up and goes, "Arrivederci," and then he died with a big smile on his face, and then he died. Such a great
Oh
story.
man,
Yeah.
yeah. There probably was so much joy in that room too.
Oh yeah.
It's beautiful.
Oh yeah. And I also think of the common Catholic phrase, and I know that there are households at Franciscan where this is like their slogan, their phrase, and it's memento mori,
Yeah,
which is, remember your death. And in some way that's kind of morbid. You don't want to think about death, but actually when you're aware that you're going to die, and by the way, that gets easier for me every single day. When you're aware that you're going to die, it helps you make decisions in light of the fact that this life is going to end. You're thinking of things from an eternal perspective. So in that sense, you are preparing for death. And if you're trying to live your life well, in view of death, when you get closer to death, hopefully it's not a terrifying experience because you have a union with Christ. That said, there are great saints who wrestled with fear of oblivion on their deathbed. I mean, Saint Therese comes to mind. It's not a guarantee, that death is going to be easy, but hopefully at least your last breath of the final moments, you'll have some consolation as you die, even if there's a struggle leading up to that.
yeah, yeah. No, it's a really interesting conversation, and then to think that people are seeing this need in the culture that we live in, and so that this is becoming a common thing, something that we read about in, what was it, USA Today, I think.
Yeah.
So it's pretty mainstream to think about this. But yeah, my first thought is just that, what about shouldn't the family be built in?
Yeah.
But even today with family, I mean, in some ways I think people still feel a little bit lonely and abandoned. We all get caught up in stuff. But
I was thinking too, when you said it's kind of sad that we have to pay people to accompany us through that dark space, but what comes to my mind is, well, isn't that not the world of psychology and clinical work? And
yeah, fair point.
I mean, I often tell people, you know, we're doing the jobs that families should be doing.
Right. Yeah.
And as family and relationships in our culture have broken down, have become a more globalized society, as there's been an increase in divorce, there's a lot of bad parenting out there. Certainly we learn skills, but in many ways we're coming in and trying to repair the wounds drawn from family experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we got to make a living, but I mean, I don't know about you, but I would be doing this if no one was paying me for it. I was naturally the person that people were coming to for advice. I was trying to help them through their struggles, and because the world is so broken.
Yeah.
So the paying part of it is an unfortunate dimension of it. We're fortunate enough that what we would naturally do, people will pay for it. We can make a living off of it. But, just caring about people, I think is human.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And then there's also the brokenness of our humanity, which makes it necessary. So I think it's a really good point. And it is sad. And that's been, a big part of my experience so far with the clinical work through the work that you guys are teaching me is, recognizing that we can play that valuable role. And then why is there a business model tied into it? I mean, you learned about this for many years, right? To prepare you and to help you become better at it. And so, there's value in that for sure. But yeah, it is a little difficult. I do work as a builder, and I can tell you, I don't find it nearly as meaningful as this work. So that's important, even for the benefit of my own life, is to know that, like you said, you would do this anyway. Yeah, it brings something deep and out in each person who I think has a heart for it. So,
yeah, here's some more thoughts from the. I love what you're saying. Here's some more thoughts from the article. As a group, death doulas I was seeing online spoke often about guiding the dying towards an elusive good death, which we described. The idea is that planning for a good death can help us live better lives. So when we talked about living a better life, we talked about the spiritual side of things, of preparing you for eternal life, right? This is what the article says. That means saying I love you to someone who doesn't know it, going on a perpetually delayed vacation, writing a long marinating novel before it's too late. So it's like their approach to dealing with death is clinging to life in a way.
Right.
It's not looking ahead.
Wow. Interesting. That's interesting.
They urge us to understand or embrace our mortality. They urge us to understand that it's a natural process of the human body. That's not consolation to me. It's natural that you're going to die. So I still don't want to. The death positivity movement was once niche, but it became especially visible during the pandemic. Yeah, people were terrified of death. Everyone was faced with death at the same time.
Yeah, somebody came up with this whole business idea during the pandemic. I think looking around and just seeing everybody so much more aware of their mortality, and I think that's a big thing. Whether you call it a success in our culture or not, I don't necessarily think so, but we do a really good job of just keeping people distracted from deeper thoughts. Going into, we have this deep-seated fear, right? We face death. This is probably the most certain reality of your life, is that you will face death.
Yes.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
Don't. Right? Isn't that the easiest way to do it?
Avoid it. Try and live forever. Like, there's a lot of stuff here in the article that talks about ways that we try to avoid death and prolong life. And I think even science is attempting to find ways to create immortality. Maybe we didn't get into the AI stuff today and how they're putting flesh on robots, human flesh on robots. I wanted to, but like transferring your consciousness to another entity, like it's attempts to live forever and avoid death. And even they're talking about a good death involves like not being alone. You're still alone. Like when you're still alone on your deathbed, even though you're surrounded by loved ones, it's only like a certain level of consolation that comes with the fact that someone's in the room with you. That's not them dying with you and going through the doors of death. Like only Christianity offers that consolation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thought that I had that just popped into my mind is this sort of idea of clinging to life, holding on to life, that maybe in a beautiful way is having children. That you live on in them, that they are, in a way, they are your legacy. Knowing, of course, that we're all mortal, right? But something that will outlive you, that is like I like legacy. My kids will get the best part of me, but that legacy is also something that lives on, that you can find peace in. I think that, again, being surrounded by family really does, to me, seem like the ideal way to face a good death.
It's true. Yeah. And some people think of like their work as their legacy, but I like what you're highlighting here is that like your children are your legacy. And that makes sense from a Catholic perspective too, because one of the things, the thing that is eternal is love, right? Like Christ, God is love, and he is eternal life. And so like the part of you that lives on in your children is your love. That transcends death. That still exists in this world. I heard a priest say one time, and he was kind of an okay priest. He was he was okay, but I want to give him credit for this one. He talked about at a funeral that about how when someone dies and we hurt because of them dying, it's because that's the love that keeps us tethered to them through the doors of death. That's why people don't want to stop hurting oftentimes when someone dies.
Interesting.
It's like that's their reminder of that person. That's their love, their connection. Because if I'm not hurting about someone dying anymore, it's like I've lost them forever.
Right.
Like I'm tethered through them. Like that's the love of the pain and the suffering.
That's interesting. That's a really interesting insight.
Yeah.
Wow.
I thought that was pretty good. Well,
sounds like a good
12:01.
priest.
He had his moments, just like all of us. We have our moments. Broken clock is right twice a day. Sam, awesome having you on today. Thanks so much.
Such a pleasure. Thank you, guys. This is awesome.
Yeah, we'll have to have you come back on. God bless everyone. Get ready for the debate tomorrow.
Oh boy.
Dr. Greg will be firing on all cylinders on Friday as we talk about that, I'm sure.